We're keen to share a little bit more about some of the sort of organizations working in this space, some of the challenges and opportunities we see, and then drill down on a piece of legislation that we're happy to see introduced just this past or last week, I suppose, dealing with one of the major issues regarding private landowners hosting public access trails. So yeah, with that, I'll jump right in. So just a little bit of background about outdoor recreation in Vermont. We count over 8,000 miles of public access trails. Outdoor rec is stewarded by a strong collaboration of public land managers, both at the state and federal level, as well as private nonprofit stewardship organizations. And I'll pause there. I'm Nick Bennett. I'm the chair of the Vermont Trails and Greenways Council. I'm also the executive director of the Vermont Mountain Bike Association, which is one of these organizations that are responsible for stewardship. In addition, just to dive back into the background, outdoor recreation really we think about as a sector that comprises both outdoor business as well as outdoor stewardship. So folks that are really helping Vermont's economy tap into the promise of outdoor recreation, as well as the individuals and organizations that are helping maintain those assets. Many of our communities across the state have really leaned in heavily to outdoor recreation as kind of an important component of their identity. And public access recreation is a designated purpose for land conservation as well. That we think is quite vital as we think about 30 by 30 and the conservation planning Vermont has ahead of us. Vermont presently, the outdoor recreation contributes almost 5%, 4.8% to Vermont state GDP. That's an increase over last year of 0.2%. And it keeps us second place in the nation in terms of percentage of GDP that outdoor recreation contributes. So Hawaii is still ahead of us, but they've got volcanoes, they've got oceans. So we feel pretty good about ourselves. And critically, a component of all this is that private landowners host almost 3/4 of public access trails in Vermont. Given our lack of generally public land, private landowners who really rely heavily on their essentially gratitude or their willingness to provide their land for recreation. To talk just for a moment about the Vermont Trails and Greenways Council. So we represent really the collective trail stewardship organizations in Vermont. That includes the organization that I work for, Vermont Mountain Bike Association, but also a collection of motorized and non-motorized organizations from VASP and VASA to organizations like the Green Mountain Club, Catamount Trail Association. So we really represent holistically the organizations that are stewarding recreation. Our organization collectively, when we think about that, our individual organizations represent over 50,000 members, log hundreds of thousands of hours of volunteer time annually. We help manage all 8,000 miles of those trails and support tens of thousands of jobs statewide through our organizations and the contributions that the trails play to those economies. We also work closely. Many of us have partnership agreements, both with state and the federal land managers to do trail stewardship. And we really are the direct connection with landowners who host trails throughout the state. To talk for a moment about stewardship, that's kind of the core of the Trails and Greenways Council and many of our organizations. We really focus on how do we maintain and thoughtfully grow trail infrastructure through private landowner relationships and those partnerships with public land managers. So that's a combination of how do we balance respectful but equitable access to the landscape. We really fundamentally, people are getting outside to be able to experience Vermont outdoors. We want to respect and tap into that, but without overriding sort of the natural beauty that Vermont does have. Our organization applies very stringent best management practices. So when we go out and build and maintain trail, we have clear guidelines on how to do that in a responsible way with minimal environmental impact. And we really focus on thoughtful planning and how we maintain the existing infrastructure and then add to it where appropriate. Many of our organizations are professionally led, but we really rely heavily on volunteers. So as I mentioned before, collectively, those hundreds of thousands of volunteer hours are vital and have been vital to maintaining trails across the state. And many of our organizations, to loop back to landowners, really we are anchored in those relationships with private landowners. A good example being, I'm not sure if she's testified yet in this committee this year, but Abby Long, the executive director of Kingdom Trails, they rely on close to 100 landowners to provide that trail resource to the Northeast Kingdom. And most of our funding, very little of it comes to the state of Vermont or the federal government. Most of it comes through memberships, grants, and philanthropic support. So I think to briefly touch on the benefits of outdoor recreation, fundamentally it supports healthy and resilient communities. So it allows folks to tap into the outdoors. I was just at the press conference downstairs and Senator Marcotte brought us back to 5 years ago when COVID came to all of us essentially. And the role and to think about what if outdoor recreation had not been there, had not been a way that we could get outside, connect with others, whether it be skiing, riding, just even on a hike outdoors, and how important we all realized outdoor recreation was at that point. Additionally, we view outdoor recreation as and trails as a critical connector to foster ecological awareness and conservation. It's how we connect people with the outdoors. And sort of as a core to many of us are certainly in much of the conversation today is that how outdoor recreation and trails can fuel sustainable economic development. So outdoor businesses, which the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance represents, the attraction and retainment of new residents. I moved to this state in large part a few years ago due to outdoor recreation, the supporting infrastructure and amenities that we invest in to provide. And really now, and the number on this page actually might be dated because I think we're up to over 15 million annual visitor trips who come to Vermont. Often that is anchored in recreation as a driver. As I mentioned before, just the overall contribution to GDP in Vermont is significant and second only behind Hawaii in the country. One of the challenges we face is the growth. So over the past decade and long before COVID, we have seen a dramatic increase in the use of recreational assets. That's whether you think winter recreation, summer recreation, biking, hiking, it doesn't matter. Between double and triple numbers we've seen increase across the state. A lot of that's driven from outdoor visitors, but it's actually a trend that we've seen nationwide too. Over half of Americans recreated outdoors in 2021, and that number just nationally has increased every year over the past decade. So we're seeing outdoor recreation really continue to grow across the country. And noting that for many of us that steward these assets, that's become an increasing strain for us. As grateful as we are and happy to see that folks are enjoying trails in particular, it puts an additional burden from a stewardship perspective in terms of maintenance and maintaining those relationships with private landowners. So among the challenges we face, which the overall picture is great, it's obviously outdoor recreation is contributing significantly to Vermont's economy and health and well-being, but there are some real challenges we face. Among those, deferred maintenance. So it's certainly been a challenge as we've continued to rely on volunteer support. The growth in recreation has made us backlog of maintenance that we'd really like to conduct on trails has only grown. Stewardship in general, our funding is well short of what we'd like to have, and we often shoestring things together to maintain and expand the trails that across the state. Organizational capacity remains an issue. So as much as almost all the dollars we receive do go directly into those trail systems and repairs and things like that. And so actually investing in organizations is a challenge. We also face challenges too from regulation and oversight. So Act 250 trails are regulated through Act 250. It's an ill-fitting scheme for trails in many cases and presents problems to many challenges when we think about growing trail projects beyond a certain size. And as I mentioned before, demand that increases certainly strained our organizations as well. A few other challenges worth noting. We don't, as much as we have that top line number of 4.8%, we don't have a very good perspective of the economic impact beyond that in terms of how outdoor recreation is really driving the sandwich shop in a community, the gas station, the overnight, how that really breaks down as geographic levels. So we have a high level from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, but to really be able to better understand where and how those economic impacts are most significant and how to grow them thoughtfully in the state is a big challenge as well. I don't have to bring up climate change. We fortunately have gone a winter without a major thaw, but the picture on the right is actually the trail system near my house at Perry Hill. This was during the 2023 flooding. That has put a significant strain on our work as well. And then we pivoted very quickly to thinking about how do we make sure all of our work has climate resilience in mind. It certainly put an additional burden on organizations. And the last one, which I'll talk about more in a second, is our majority reliance on private landowners without any recognition or support. So our organizations rely a majority on landowners. These are agreements we have that, again, they receive nothing in return other than the knowledge that they're benefiting their communities. To talk about private landowners, as I mentioned, is certainly vital to Vermont's outdoor recreation economy, and close to 3/4 of our public trails are hosted by them. Different factors motivate landowners, but whether they themselves like to participate in recreation, whether they see the economic values it brings to their community. But the reality is that they receive, again, no recognition, formal or otherwise, in hosting these trails. And that has actually brought significant challenges in several trail systems across the state. As a withdrawal of public access, we've seen it. Kingdom Trails has had issues both last year and several years ago in terms of landowners deciding due to user conflict or other reasons to say, you know what, I've had enough, or I'm no longer interested in having my trails be open to the public. That can create devastating consequences, particularly in terms of connectivity, depending on the trail system. And that's not just been with mountain bikers, that's been across trail use scenarios in terms of whether that's precipitated due to negative user interactions, or, as is a big issue now in Vermont, changes in land ownership can have a huge impact on us. We're seeing many folks move into the state. Some of them don't understand the Vermont ethic of opening land, and have just said, no, I'm done having folks, recreate on my property. We've worked very hard as organizations to address those concerns, and we pride ourselves on relationships with landowners, but we actually have no tools really beyond that in our toolbox other than being good stewards and maintaining those relationships. So we currently, a bill was just introduced. It's currently in House Environment. We're very hopeful it ends up in this committee as we think it's the most appropriate one to really consider the challenges here at stake. But House 147 is an act relating to establishing the Recreational Trails Compensation Study Committee. That was introduced by Senator Marcotte. would do several things, and there's a list here, but I'll just describe it at a higher level. But essentially, the committee's work would focus on understanding what is the economic benefit private landowners are really providing to Vermont, and assessing landowner costs and liabilities. What are the issues that they take on in terms of when they do decide to host trails? As I mentioned, economic value is important. Analyze how others are doing it elsewhere. There are other states where recreation access does have formal recognition. And actually come up with some ideas about how could we officially, or what are some program ideas? How could this work? And critically putting a price tag on those options as well. So essentially doing the fundamental work of researching what is the value that this private landowners are presently providing in the Vermont economy? What are the costs of potential programs to actually recognize them formally? And then coming up with some actual models for recognition. There's some key considerations here because not all trails are created equal. Most folks immediately point to the current use program because that's an existing program that provides use value appraisal for landowners that either do forestry, that agriculture, or conserve their land. Trails are a little bit of a different animal in some ways. They're not area based, and you can imagine that a very small section of trail on a smaller parcel might have an outsized economic impact relative to a section of trail on a large piece of land. So those are the kind of considerations that this study would focus on, to how do we differentially understand the value a trail would bring, and then if and how we recognize landowners for hosting that trail. Just a few details here. The committee would consist of a pretty wide sweeping set of folks to really weigh on the issue. Folks, or the FBR commissioner and the commissioner of the Department of Taxes would participate, or their delegates. A delegate or a representative from the Vermont Trails and Greenways Council, a development from the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative, a person from the land conservation community, and then landowners themselves, both with and without existing conservation easements, to provide their perspective. We'd also have an expert from the trail building, design, and planning community, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns representative, and then others could be invited as appropriate. But trying to really think about a committee that could really help us address all the potential implications and approach this in a thoughtful way.
Representative Yels.
Yeah.
Okay. Nick, coin that word, Vermont Outdoors Reconomics.
Economics, I like that. Yeah,
No, it's
it's
real.
subliminal.
You go up into the Northeast Kingdom right now, and every community is flourishing because we're having winter. Every community is flourishing because we're having winter with the vast trail system. It's going to make a huge help.
Absolutely. And we have to ensure we're investing in ways that we can be irrespective of the winter we have or the summers we have. And that's a big focus of ours. How can we maintain that?
Burke's a different critter now because of the bike trails down in Burke. And I'd like to see that come to Derby as well.
Yeah. And that's, I think that we view, if we can be successful with, or if this legislation passes, we believe this will not only help us really critically maintain the trails we have, because we can work with landowners to secure the existing access, but also very much incentivize new landowners to say, well, I'm interested now in opening my lands to recreation. So yeah, absolutely. This provides very much an incentive for landowners to participate and to get involved, because that's the most fundamental thing we need when we think about expanding or growing recreation, is having the right places to do.
If I want to make sure Nick has enough time to get through his presentation. So if the committee has got clarifying questions, I saw Rep. Lipsky, you had a hand up.
Well, it's important for me to ask Nick a question, but I'll defer before let him make sure he gets to his whole.
I think this is it. I want to give plenty of time for Tom and James too, because they should.
Right, and then if.
No,
Go ahead.
I'm basically done. So the bill does have a cost, obviously, the committee themselves. There'd be an appropriations for consulting support to actually develop this plan. And a report will be due by the end of next year with the findings and legislative recommendations. So that's pretty much it on 147. As I mentioned, there's several members in this committee who are co-sponsors of this bill, and we deeply appreciate that. And just really emphasizing, now is the time for this bill. We're long deferred on recognizing landowners for the recreation access they provide, and it'll help secure that into the future.
Yeah, so Nick, thank you. Obviously, co-sponsor of that bill, have been in real supporter of outdoor rec in general. But this Friday, I have the honor, the responsibility to introduce a new world record holder who's a constituent in uphill
No.
skiing. Yeah. So with that said, I'm asking you, you know, in the pandemic, maybe the skiers were shut down or access to, it became a big thing. It's been a big thing for decades all over the world, but it's really a lot of Vermonters depend on it for exercise, health. They can do it from 5:30 in the morning with a headlamp, skin up, come down, be at work at 7:30. What is the growth increase in uphill / backcountry sector in outdoor recreation in the last few years? I'm asking you for counsel if you have any sense of the growth of that sector.
I don't have numbers, and it's a great question. It's one of the things that we're working right now on an economic impact study that would be through VOREC, that would help complement the study we're working on here, but that would give us a much better sense of it's exactly the kind of statistics that we need better sense of is by use type. What has growth looked like for the past few years? How has that been spread geographically? What are the specific mechanisms does that contribute to the economy? So the only thing I have is anecdotal evidence, seeing more folks participate, more gear being sold, but we'd love to know more about specifically what that's like.
So in this case, anecdotal it's not hard data, but but you've seen a increase or exponential growth in
for sure,
skiing.
yes, or certainly the commensurate with where we're seeing elsewhere across the sector for sure, just in folks out there in the woods.
I won't quote you, but thank you.
I'll work on getting you better numbers if I can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, good, thank you.
Thank you
So
very
did you
much.
want to turn the seat over then to
I would love to, yeah.
Tom?
The guys who actually
Okay.
get to spend more time in the woods than I do.
And I'm sorry that we're so short on time.
As fast as possible.
You've got,
You can cut it short.
well, and you've got written testimony that I think has already been turned in, and we've
Sure.
got it on our committee page, so make sure the committee members know that too.
Is that? Okay.
Sure, thank you. My name is Tom Lepesker. This is James Patterson. We run a trail building operation out of Vermont. We got asked to speak here yesterday afternoon. So what you're gonna get is some talking points and some pictures with no words to illustrate kind of what we're doing. All these pictures are from projects we did this year. And yeah, we spent all of our time in the woods, so not talking to distinguished folks like yourselves. So we're gonna do our best here and bear with us as much as you can.
Yeah, you're welcome to pull that, please sit there and pull the chair around if you want.
So, James, if you just want to start, we'll just start.
Yeah, I don't know, I guess for what we're doing, we are a design, build, maintain trails, kind of throughout central Vermont here. Depending on what we're working, we'll work for VIMBA chapters on private, public, state land. We do a lot of work on federal, National Forest Service land as well. I think what we're doing, we're the labor intensive piece in the field, building the infrastructure, creating these things that people are moving to Vermont or living here, enjoying and coming to recreate here in the state. So kind of we're the baseline for the start of the process. I think last year we'll see, kind of have some pictures here of what we kind of do out there. We had 20, there's 4 of us that we work with, in our team, and kind of did 20-ish trail projects throughout kind of central Vermont. Those range from kind of maintenance projects to kind of increase the trail's ability to make it through some of the heavy rains we're having, and keep those looking good throughout the season, to building new trails like, in places that, normally have not had trail access.
So just to further describe like what our business looks like beyond 4 people working in the woods with a bunch of tiny equipment. Just to illustrate some of the type of work we do in the spring, we're often responsible for doing maintenance work, which is really important on these natural surface trails, especially because we want to bring them up to the condition that they were built in so that they stay high quality and there aren't future wear and tear problems. And this is becoming more and more difficult because we're having huge number increases out here, and not very often are there paid maintenance crews. So this year we did work in Stowe and Little River State Park. Performed a lot of labor intensive maintenance, which is a difficult task because it requires a weird level of expertise for a person running a rake. So it's labor intensive and expertise heavy.
I think the various projects, we're building, we talked about the Belmont Trail, which is kind of the Catamount style mountain bike trail. Connectivity is the main piece there. We've built a lot of sections of that. This is a project we did in the Mooslamoo National Forest down in kind of Ripton area. That connectivity piece, trying to connect different areas. They have a campground down there to a Silver Lake, which is a beautiful destination that's hard to access. We've done a lot of work in the adaptive mountain bike and trail sphere where we were working in Bolton in a new place called the Driving Range, building trails that are accessible not only for regular bikes, but also adaptive bikes. So to get a wider range of people out there enjoying the forest. We've also run kind of trail clinics through the Vermont Mountain Bike Association and the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance, training different people that work in the industry or volunteers on how to properly maintain this infrastructure we have in the state so that when people have the best experience in the woods possible and that they are as as sustainable as possible with these weather events we've been getting.
So why are we out there? Why are we trying to accomplish this? What are we trying to do? We're trying to build really high quality trail infrastructure that is going to be resilient to the climate, which is becoming more and more of a challenge, which is going to be in trails that are going to be more accessible to more people. And that can range from compact networks that are mostly suited to local communities to infrastructure that's serving recreation ports. I think some of these bullet points have been hit on quite a few times. We're talking about $2.1 billion of money coming into the state because of outdoor recreation. We are trying to, and folks to live and visit here in Vermont. We are trying to build trails that are accessible to a wide range of trail users. And like I said before, the climate resilience is becoming extremely important, not easy.
Just as a whole, we've talked about the industry growing. I think it has relied a lot on volunteer efforts to maintain and build a lot of these trails, but moving forward in the importance of this infrastructure to the state, with people coming to visit and use these things all the time, that having the funding source to be able to properly maintain trails and to update stuff for the future, I think would go a long way.
Yeah, we both moved here from a different state. This will be the 9th year that I've been here building. And what attracted me to the state was the outdoor opportunities and also the potential opportunity. You could see that there was a clear opportunity here for what could be, or building upon the existing trail infrastructure, not just for biking, which is our focus, but for all forms of trail use. And while that's really exciting, and we've had great relationships with all these different organizations, especially VIMBA, which Nick has been in charge of for a while now, which is really forward thinking as far as getting land access and funding access and creating really high quality experiences. I think what we're starting to see now is a lot of our neighboring states sort of understanding like, oh, this is a little bit different than the winter industry, which seems to be shrinking despite the really nice winter we're having right now. And this is a future investment opportunity. We need to not lose sight of that, or I don't want to say it's an arms race, but we have a really clear advantage right now. And I think it's not the time to get to this peak and kind of coast downhill. I think we need to keep building on, especially the maintenance and the construction of really high quality trails that will really serve a wide group of people.
You got
Maybe a couple other bullet points we can talk about, and then we can field any questions you guys have about what your curiosity or not curiosity about what we're doing out here in Vermont. Just some of the things that we've worked alongside of VOBA, the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance, on are teaching these clinics and classes about proper trying to develop proper workforce so that we have hands on deck for these projects that are clearly coming. Right sizing the funding sources for the stewardship that needs to happen out here. I think the VORAC plan to develop, about like, okay, if we go and put some investment into this community, like, let's see, what is the direct implication? What is the economics? I like that too. What is coming out of that? Like, we need that data to be able to look at and then lean on and say, hey, we did this project and this is how there was a direct effect. And I think that would be really beneficial and helpful for everyone to, when we go saying, hey, we're kind of falling behind here and we've got a lot of trails to maintain, a lot more people out there using them. This is what we need and why. I think that's going to be a huge next step for us. And I think for us running this little business, which is like this weird, nuanced, niche excavation business in Vermont, we love it here. We're raising our families here. We love living here. There's more than just our work. But part of that, what will make that sustainable for us is we need some support. We're going to need some support, especially moving forward.
Is the work that you do on both public land and private land?
Yeah. So we do the gamut. We worked on state land, national forest land, private land. It's all, for the most part, we're doing all open to the public trail access.
Yeah, whenever possible, we just prefer to do that because it's the
good.
greatest benefit to the most amount of people. And these trails are time consuming and labor
And
intensive.
I think like one, based out of Rochester and what has happened, you can see the anecdotal evidence of, in Rochester. Just there's been a lot of trail development in that area and what that has done. It's see the businesses doing well. There's a new inn that opened up just kind of geared towards cyclists. And you can see that there is no hard data on that yet potentially, but it is you can see these things kind of transforming.
Representative Byrd.
Chair. So I'm friends with Dave from college. We were both mechanical, or you were in civil, right? And Adam Morse. If you just introduce yourself real quick.
I work for one of the chapters of them, called Fellowship Radio. We're the largest chapter in Chittenden County. We maintain 10 different spaces and about 100 miles of trail. So yeah, they're contracted builder. We're sort of on the ground maintenance and landowner relations. Some of those real sort of nitty gritty details that Nick discussed in his testimony. And I could say, 100 different things for another hour in here about all the work that these folks are doing and the impacts that we feel and the benefit to our community, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we didn't have more time for you. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, these guys quit their engineering jobs to do this, so it's like it's high level stuff,
Yeah.
And then we have a public trail. I built 1 mile of page wire fence around because it's a pasture through a grant from the state. So definitely
On your land.
on our land.
Yeah.
So I think recreation ties a lot of things together, and just same way that agriculture is it's more than just the dollar value of what we import or export on those products. It's quality of life for our whole state is involved in what we're doing, what these guys are doing. So yeah, you guys all.
I would add one more thing, like I do travel a lot and like to visit trails around other states, and when I talk to people in just about every other state, they're so impressed by the organization that trails have here in Vermont. And to Nick's point, that falls on the shoulders of nonprofits and private landowners and volunteers. And we've organized really well, and we're working really hard to like bring these assets to our communities, and we're going to continue to do that. We love it, and that's why we live here.
We don't have that bill that you alluded to earlier, and we might get it, in which case we will see more of you, Nick, and maybe all of you. Just whether the other folks want to just introduce themselves before we break for lunch.
I'm Misha Dolphin from Medford Path, and I want to say as a trail network manager, the idea of trails is boulder studded, exposed roots eroding in every rain. When you look at the work that these guys are doing, they changed my whole perspective of what trail could be, what a sustainable trail could be that is accessible to many people, to little children, to older people, to people in wheelchairs, but also after rain, after big rain, it doesn't run out because of how it's designed and built. So thank you.
I'm Brian Lamoureux. I'm Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance's Outdoor Careers and Business Development Manager. So I'm helping VOBA administer some of the programs around workforce development training for trail builders, bike mechanics, and ski technicians, with the goal of preparing the workforce to meet the market demand or the demand of tomorrow that these guys have all spoken to around the trail infrastructure.
I'm remembering now that some of you are going to be downstairs in room 11.
We welcome you. Pizza or seltzers. We'd love for you to join us for lunch. We can chat more. Yeah, you're all welcome and encouraged to do that. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming in. Hope that the rest of the day goes well, and we'll see you again, I'm sure.